Excellent. Okay, well, welcome to Unlocking Power of Primary Sources for students of all ages. My name is Alex. I'm the manager for curriculum development at New York Public Library's Center for Educators in Schools. And we were founded at the library to help make teaching with the library's primary sources easier and more accessible to K through 12 educators. So I'm part of a team that works to do that with field trips, educator programming, and circulating collections of professional titles for educators. And my part in this work is publishing teaching with primary source curriculum materials for K through 12 teachers. So these publications are designed, in short, to help educators and their students make better usage of library resources, their library card, our databases, and our collections. But we also set an additional goal of joy for ourselves in our work, and I'll talk a little bit about how we incorporate that in our work. So our design approach is everything but the last mile of content delivery. We want to provide everything a teachers need to implement this content for their specific needs and audience. To that end, we include historical context essays to support educator background knowledge, item-specific model questions and answers, and summative and evaluative activities to bring it all together, in addition to translating the transcripts into Spanish, Arabic, and Chinese, including plain text transcripts, and making the PDF accessible. Our previous publications, you can see here on the screen, there's To Make Public Our Joy, Black New Yorkers Commemorating Emancipation, 1808 to 1865, Reading Dangerously, Censorship and the Freedom to Read in 20th Century America, and New York City's Rent Strikers, Jewish Activism, and Housing Reform in the Progressive Era. These publications were all targeted to middle school and high school. And I'm really excited today to talk about our elementary school publication, which is coming out this fall. It is a civics case study called Hogtown, New York City, When Pigs Cleaned City Streets. It is for upper elementary, so grades 3 through 5, and it is wrapped in this civics case study that says we can use primary sources to learn about what concerns people had in the past about living in a city, and we can learn from their experiences to inform our opinions on what a nuisance is and the impact community rules can have on our neighbors. So in the early 19th century New York City, pigs took care of sanitation in New York and were an important part of a lot of lower class families' life. They were removed violently. And so the city, the curriculum asks students, like after this historical example, to think about, like, do I do anything that might be caused a nuisance, and how do those rules impact each other? So our design question when we came to this publication is here. How might we make archival primary sources accessible to an upper elementary school educator and student audience? And I'm going to talk about two of the things we did here, leveled historical text and graphic organizers. So here's an example of an adapted text that we did with this article from the Evening Post from August 4th, 1821. And it's an incredible article that talks about these hogs running at large in the streets. And we really wanted to make this accessible to that upper elementary audience, but the original language is dense. And there's too much vocabulary in there that was just inaccessible. And so we went to adapt this transcript with a design question here. How might we preserve as many meanings as possible while making the language developmentally appropriate? And this was a really challenging thing. This was actually something that my team tried out an AI tool for. There's lots of free AI tools that will level text for you that are free for K through 12 educators to use. And we didn't like it. It was a really fine line to walk to figure out which phrases were really important to keep for the layered meanings of this article. So, for example, all of the AI models changed the phrase "disgraceful nuisance" because it's not developmentally appropriate necessarily. But our historians and our curriculum writers felt it was really important to leave that phrase intact because of how impactful it was for the understanding of what the article was saying. Also in this article, you'll see there's a little bit of a counter reading here. There's some offensive language in the original article referring to female blacks were very ferocious. And we changed some of the phrasing, but we left it in to talk about that criticality here about we wanted students to know like when people were losing their pigs and they were being taken away, who are those people that are being affected? And here's an example in the archives of how you can see that. So this is one example we did. We transcribed and adapted a couple of articles about the time for students can get a sense of what's happening. And then we made graphic organizer. We had an incredibly lucky to have a graphic designer on staff, and so they helped us make these worksheets to help students imagine what's happening in the scene, and then to organize their op-ed. The curriculum ends with asking students to write an op-ed about a nuisance and a solution to it in their community. Um, so really excited about that project. The other project that we're working on is teaching with historic postcards, and I've become a postcard evangelist through this work. Our design question for this project is, how do we preserve the specialness of working in person with archival sources while balancing conservation and providing access at the scale of our public school system? And originally, here's an example, is this incredible postcard that's in our collection. I saw the hippopotamus yesterday. The heat did not bother him. He was taking a bath, your father. And these are just really lovely sources. We had this original idea, our first idea, they're flexible. They are simple in their construction, image with a bit of text, but there's a lot of complexity that you can get into, and you can developmentally appropriate apply. You can make a photo, you can make an image, and you can write one or two sentences at this age. So I love this postcard. The front is "Seeing New York, ain't she stylish?" And on the back, the message they've written is, "This is me." And then it invites comparisons to modern day social media, pairing an image with a short piece of text. Sometimes it's related and sometimes it's not. Originally, we were going to create replicas of postcards in our collection and send them out to have an in-person experience with the postcards, but we have two really unique resources at the library, the picture collection, and we have a school support and outreach team. So the picture collection has, what does it say here? Thousands, covering 12,000 subjects. The picture collection is a collection of circulating materials in the research libraries. And one of the materials that circulate there are historic postcards. The school support and outreach team is a team that is in our branch system that is dedicated to helping teachers and schools and they throughout the system, and they lead programs. And so we paired them together. This was pretty straightforward. We had one outreach librarian in Staten Island who visited visited 3 schools 32 times, brought the historic postcards to middle school students who engaged with them to learn about what a primary source was. So we have a lot of hope for the future of this program. We originally wanted it to be for second graders to think about community and how they would represent their community and communicate with their community. Our school outreach librarian found this real demand from middle school just to help students understand what a primary source is through an actual examination of one. And so we're working on iterating this program to think about how we might support those different learning goals. Learning goal that is understanding the postcard as a primary source versus understanding it as a way that people used to represent their community and how they want to represent their community. So these are two ways that we're working with some of our youngest folks to introduce them to the field, to introduce them to primary sources and archives. Thinking so. I'm going to hand it over to Sarah, who's going to take it away.
All right, and Alex, am I good just to tell you when to change slides?
Yes.
All right. Hi, everyone. Again, I am Sarah Andrus. Today, I'll be talking about strengthening relationships with high school educators to get them in the door, and then how we have been focusing on the specialness of our special collections in our
Mic off.
Um, so we are also an American institution, so we're highlighting everyday American life, and we're trying to make sure our students then, when they see us, can feel a place where they would one day maybe be able to see themselves in our collection. So that's what we're really focusing on here. Working at the Henry Ford, at the Benson Ford Research Center, I have spent the last several years trying to rebuild our relationship with a charter high school that exists on our campus. So I'm going to catch you up a bit on us since I'm not New York Public Library. I'm not at a university. I kind of exist in the in-betweens. So bear with me for a couple of seconds while I get you caught up on who everyone is here so you can kind of understand where we're coming from. Since I'm talking about this partnership, I am at the Benson Ford Research Center. We are part of the Henry Ford. We are not owned by Ford Motor Company. I just like to throw that out there because everybody thinks we are. We include the Henry Ford Museum of American Innovation and Greenfield Village as part of our venue operations here. And the Research Center serves as a hub, not just for our staff, but also the public. We have over 3,000 archival collections, 85,000 reference books, and regularly see upwards of 3,000 reference requests a year. We're also an almost 100-year-old institution. And while we're best known for being a museum and a living history village, we have also hosted multiple iterations of an educational institution on our campus for the last 100 years. The long history includes part of Henry Ford's initial vision for the museum and village, which was to provide hands-on learning opportunities for students. So in 28, before we were open as a museum, a school opened here. A high school was added in 34, and through trials and tribulations, those initial iterations come to an end in 69. 28 years later, the idea of a school on our museum's campus comes back again, and we open the Henry Ford Academy in 97. Next slide, please. So the Henry Ford Academy is the charter school on our campus. It was developed in partnership with Ford Motor Company and the Henry Ford, and they called it a unique concept at the time to host a high school inside of a museum as if we hadn't done it 100 years earlier. The Academy operates with 2 campuses spread out across our campus. 9th graders are actually in our museum, and 10th through 12th graders are in our Living History Village. Some of them take actual classes in train cars. It's pretty cool. The admission is determined by a lottery system, and the only requirement is that students live in Wayne County, which is where Detroit is located, as well as Dearborn, Michigan, which is where I am located here at the Henry Ford. The entire student body maxes out at approximately 500 students each year, and their college prep curriculum addresses 5 developmental areas, including academic content, technology, communication, thinking and learning, and personal development. So even with this unique educational setting, the Henry Ford Academy is lacking a traditional school media center or library. So we kind of pick up the slack there sometimes. We've been providing instructional sessions. We also provide some circulation opportunities when our collections overlap. So our hope, sorry, I went too far ahead of my notes for a second there. So our hope of providing robust instructional sessions has required our team to rethink not just the opportunities we offer in a classroom setting, but also growing the relationship we have with the Academy's educators. So we want to make sure we are front of mind when they are creating lesson plans, and that we are here as a resource and not just a like, oh, I don't actually feel like teaching today. Can I bring my class to you? Our relationship with the educators and the administration at the Academy has changed drastically in the last 5 years. There were staffing cuts and changes to our own institutional collecting that have changed my job responsibilities and that of my team, that left us less nimble to handle these like one-off requests that made it really, really difficult for if you came to us a week of and said, hey, can we bring in students? We'd have to book out a new space. We'd have to find staff that was available, and that would just become impossible. So we were self-perpetuating a cycle of, we can't get you in, you're not going to ask us. And in that same time frame, the academy also was seeing significant turnover. The last 5 years have been rough for everybody. So we're now working on not being an afterthought, but being front of mind. We've been very lucky in that we have had a constant champion and a power user from the academy, so that we've never fully fallen off anyone's radar. One of the social studies instructors regularly brings his elective history classes to learn about primary sources, how they can be used for research. And then he also is a big proponent of making sure his students see how they can be perceived throughout history. So this year we are leveraging that support, and we are really hoping to turn what has been a downturn the last few years with high school student engagement into something a lot more robust and a bit more dynamic. Our first attempts at reestablishing this engagement have been really well received, and at this moment we had taken on a student consulting course through the University of Michigan that would work with us and the academy to see how we could communicate better and meet them where they had needs without really putting too much extra burden on our staff. So this year, as part of that, myself and several colleagues will be taking our instructors during their teacher prep week on multiple tours through our storage facilities. So now we're working on using that time to not just show them cool things in storage, which we're a museum. Lots of people find that as a really cool thing. When we get to bring them through storage, it gets them engaged. It makes us front of mind when they're there. But we're also going to use this as a time to pull out artifacts that we would then show to their students. So we can show them what activities we would be promoting and what we would really like a post-2020s audience and what we think their students in this time frame would really like to see. So by trying to kind of use that same, like, here's how we engage your students, we're trying to get them in the same door. Next slide, please. So now how are we actually creating this excitement, and how are we trying to engage these students, and what is working? So in the past few years, we have strived to create instructional sessions that center primary sources outside of traditional expectations. When we do have students analyze correspondence from our collection, we purposely select communications from well-known figures, but that are not the most important thing they've ever written. We wanted to kind of show the banality of life, get them familiar with what a primary source is, and showcase what it means to be reading somebody else's work. So we present these people as normal individuals and demonstrate how like letters and things can be similar to text or emails today. Some fan favorites include a letter from Alexander Hamilton to Aaron Burr discussing a court case they were working on. We talk about how they're frenemies, if they've seen Hamilton, things like that. What are those relationships like? What does it mean to be reading a letter between those two people? We have a lovely letter from George Washington Carver to Henry Ford. The two were friends, where he's demonstrated a new ink he developed and asking after Henry's wife. And then one of my favorites on this slide is a letter from Edsel Ford to Santa with a very modest wish list for the upcoming holiday season. So these correspondence to us highlight the way information was conveyed to colleagues, friends, to Santa, and show that sometimes there's information in that mundane the mundane way we speak to each other on a regular basis. So the Santa letter in particular, we get to ask students, okay, what do you see in this? What is really cool about a kid writing to Santa? And if you look at it, it's from 1901. At this point in time, Ford Motor Company doesn't exist. And he is telling Santa that they haven't had a Christmas tree in a few years. And can he just have some roller skates and maybe some trimmings and just really, really modest stuff? We get to talk to students about how you don't have to be super rich, and where you came from might not be where you end up. We get to spend time with, okay, what would your Christmas list say? And what would you learn about that if someone were to read it in 100 years? And kids really interact very positively with that, and seeing how like, oh, I did X or I do Y now. And I can see how maybe in the future, you don't even have to be a big important person to end up in a collection like this. So we really, really like that. Other popular activities include utilizing mail order catalogs to have students build historic wardrobes. Students are assigned a profession and a salary. With all of this information, we pick the 1930s. just because we have catalogs that focus very deeply in that area and they're more robust and not as falling apart as some of our other collection items. But they spend an hour going through these catalogs, creating wardrobe lists, and noting how long it would take to buy everything on an older saddlery. We use Sears and Montgomery Ward's catalogs, and those make it easy to show students who have never really interacted with mail order catalogs, which is becoming less and less common now, how people used to shop. And we get to compare it to places like Amazon as a fast forward of, okay, so if you needed to order toilet paper before, here's where you would order it in the past. If you didn't have access to big box stores, this is the very similar, could kind of ship everywhere point. I also take this as an opportunity to showcase things that myself and my staff remember from these catalogs. We can pull some modern ones, we can pull Target catalogs, we can show newer wish list things that they might have interacted with. Or also, I pulled today for some educators a Sears catalog that had engagement rings from the 1920s, and I can find my great grandmother's ring in that. And there's some very visceral, if I am wearing a piece of jewelry and pointing to it in a catalog to say, hey, no, these things are still great primary source documents, and this is what you can learn from this, even if nobody wrote in it. So it might not be the traditional way you think of primary sources of letters between people, but it is still a way to document time as it is happening. And lastly, we've been documenting activities around media literacy and the narratives present in the media. So for a more detailed interview with a photograph, which we do love to do, we are now in the process of looking at photo negatives to printed published images. So we have a collection from Detroit Publishing Company that includes photographs that were turned into postcards. Another shout out to Alex. And the steps in between that show the edited images before getting to final stages. We're really looking forward to using students to interrogate a photograph, learn from the image, and then understand what conscious choices are being made to edit an image so that they're actually thinking about what is being taken from them, what other people want them to see, and what's different. It's going to be a fun kind of spot the difference as things move, and some of them are far more obvious than others. Some include whited out images. So they're using photochrome to colorize these things. This image here, this postcard of the Grand Canyon, it's pretty accurate, but we know that's not exactly how the Grand Canyon looks. What is this image selling you as? What kind of bucolic art thing are we looking at here versus if you were there seeing the real image? So by the end of these sessions, we're really looking for students knowing that they belong in our collections, but what also can they learn about their families from our collections? What can they learn about everyday Americans? What can they learn for specific research purposes? So it's not just us trying to get them in and be like, okay, here's how you interact with the source, but how do you see yourself doing this in the future? How could you be building your life, making sources too, and doing this intentionally? And I think my last slide. Thank you. So the Henry Ford and the Henry Ford Academy are really unique places, but at their core, they're still a high school, and we are still a museum. So we're making sure that all of our responsibilities line up with our real job duties and that we're not stepping on toes trying to get into classrooms that might not have time or room for us. So this upcoming school year, we are focusing far more on getting into the minds and hearts of our elective instructors, the ones that are teaching non-core classes, art, music. We have a lot of elective robotics and STEM courses as well. And our collections work really, really well with this. We have early graphic designers, we have some fine artists in our collections. We have a lot of music history in our collections as well as really, really, really robust design drawings, particularly for automobiles and furniture. So we are pairing up to make packets and things that we can give to instructors so that they can work with our materials in their classroom in a more robust way, but also then come see us. So we will have a cohort coming at the end of this month, I believe. Actually, the month has gone by so fast. From the College of Creative Studies that has taken a group of high school students to spend time with us to look at design drawings. So we're working on scaling that both up and down for a summer cohort that only has time to look at this, and a class that might only want a few days of this, but they're here and we're here, and we want to make sure that we are able to service them as well. So while we have a lot in flux at the moment, all of our efforts are showing signs of success, and we are really looking forward to welcoming more students in the upcoming year to test out these new activities and to bring back our favorite old ones. And I'm really hoping that they will also challenge how we are presenting primary sources, and I get a chance to learn from them as well.
Mic on.
Thanks, Sarah. Over to Jackie.
Mic off.
Hello, I'm incredibly excited to be presenting on this topic with my fellow panelists. My name is Jacqueline, and I am the curator of Born Digital Special Collections at Vanderbilt University's Special Collections and University Archives. We are part of 9 libraries on campus, serving over 12,000 students in Nashville, Tennessee. Our mission is to deliver a legacy of cultural heritage by acquiring, preserving, and making perpetually accessible paper-based analog and digital collections of rare books, manuscripts, photographs, artifacts, audiovisual material, Vanderbilt institutional archives, and any other information, resources, or data sets we deem under the aegis of special collections. Today, I will be sharing 2 examples of focusing our resources and outreach for teachers and librarians in a K-12 setting. First, our paid student immersive fellowship experience for students called the Buchanan Library Fellowship, and then a special summer workshop for high school teachers called the Lamar Alexander Initiative. Next slide, please. Before I dive into the examples, I wanted to give a brief rationale behind this presentation and be fully transparent that the majority of my job is focused on Born Digital archiving. I really only spend 10% of my time on teaching and outreach. But I believe it is essential to encourage the next generation to use our archives, and especially capturing the interest, the magic, and the specialness of archives to students by adapting our services. My thoughts are, if we expose younger students to archives, then they will be more likely to use them in higher education. Next slide, please. First, our library-wide system has a wonderful program called the Buchanan Library Fellowship. Through this semester-long project, undergraduate students receive a stipend to work with librarians and archivists on original research projects. I have attached the website if you'd like to learn more. But after previous experiences of me visiting a high school to share digitized resources and notebooks, visiting the Metro Nashville Public Schools librarian meetings and such, I realized that I could create a fellowship for college students to use our archives and create ready-to-use digital resources for our social studies and history teachers. Next slide, please. Here is my fellowship structure. I created a 10-week syllabus. I chose 4 students who applied from a variety of majors. I was actually incredibly surprised at the wide variety of students that wanted to do this program. I thought it would only be, we have a teaching college, and I thought it would only be from there, but definitely a wide variety. And I broke down the 10 weeks into 3 sections. Part 1, all the students who had never visited an archives before. So it was a learning curve to show them archive space for finding collections, explaining how to use the reading room. And then part 2, we visited a local state archives that I had a previous relationship with, and they have a division solely focused on school outreach. And my students were able to go on a tour there and have a Q&A with the archivists. During the same time period in the syllabus, we dove into state standards for each grade level and explored other digital examples from many of the people here in TPS community. So thank you so much for all the wonderful examples that exist. And lastly, this is where the students' creativity shined. I only requested that it was an activity that would last 30 minutes, had resources, and a lesson outline. The final product shared with teachers and librarians I had shared with at surrounding schools. Next slide, please. The last few weeks, I had the students showcase their drafts to the other students in the fellowship, and it was quite fun to see what they concocted. I chose 2 examples with some screenshots to show here. This first one is geared towards 5th graders. The students chose to have a read aloud of a primary text with different speakers. A narrator tied the activity together to talk about a radio station in Nashville during World War II. And this is very low tech. The student created this in PowerPoint and adapted the text using different colors that you can see. Next slide, please. Another student using Nara's Docs Teach focused on 8th grade standards to highlight Dolly Parton, a politician Lamar Alexander, and James Sasser. They found photographs in our collections and oral histories featuring these figures and created an interactive Q&A for students to fill out. It was a progressive showcasing of resources, and students needed to respond within the Docs Teach. Next slide, please. Shifting gears, this summer we hosted a workshop called the Alexander Initiative. And this was a seminar that was for teachers around the country that taught high school, and it was an application process for them to join and work at Vanderbilt for a couple of weeks with different faculty members and then staff. Our university librarian advocated on behalf of the libraries that we should be collaborators, and using archives became a workshop featured on day one. And one of the skills that they were focusing on, we were very excited to see, was archival work, which was a natural fit for us. Next slide, please. As my colleague and I prepared for the workshop, I'm incredibly grateful that we sent a pre-visit survey for the teachers to fill out. I used Microsoft Forms, and since these teachers were visiting from around the country, and this wasn't an audience we historically reached out to, I thought, why guess what the teachers wanted when we could just ask them directly instead? Some of the questions I asked were, have you been to an archives? How do you look for primary sources beyond the curriculum? What is the most challenging aspect of teaching with them? Finally, a key question was, what subject areas would you like primary sources for? Based on the responses to subject areas, we picked collections based on them and started a handout that marked the time periods and subject areas that connected them to what collections we showed them that day, in case they wanted to refer back to them later. This workshop was extremely beneficial to understanding the differences in working with K-12 teachers versus college professors. We are hoping to extend this workshop into smaller iterations for local social studies teachers. Next slide. The college setting provides unique partnership opportunities, and with the initiative, we now started a relationship with the teaching college faculty that will extend beyond this initial visit. I also enjoyed the refreshing Buchanan Library experience for my everyday work. Working with the college students is something that I want to continue doing once a year moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Keeping it moving. Tara, you're up.
Here we go. Let's see here.
Mic off.
Alrighty. Well, as I mentioned earlier, I'm the Instruction and Outreach Archivist for Clemson University's Special Collections and Archives. And K through 12 outreach has been almost non-existent, at least for at least as long as I've been there, 5 years, maybe a little bit longer than that. I know there used to be more that was done, but it looks like, most of those people had moved on, retired and so forth. So I am starting from scratch in that regard. And so in a sense, a lot of what has been going on at Clemson's archives is, well, I don't want to say it's a little more organized than just throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. We are willing to go and do anything and everything that we can to find our footing in terms of K-12 outreach. I had done some other things in the past when I was at other institutions working on Virginia state standards for the Jamestown virtual Jamestown project and a number of things like that. So I had some ideas, but nothing that I was picking up and running with when I first got to Clemson. Clemson's in an odd position as a relatively new research one institution. We have 22,500 undergrads, 5,900 graduate students. The R1 designation is fairly new. So in a sense, this has been a place where, you know, the deeply embedded in the community and in the schools at some time, local schools in the sometime in the past. And it wasn't all that long ago. So we have, you know, we don't have a huge shop here. I am the only, until there was me, there was no one who was doing the instruction and outreach specifically as their entire job. So I've had to learn a lot on the fly. And I am developing, you know, an outreach program all together, not just this part of it, but we're redoing the entire thing from the ground up. So I, you know, come up with a framework, mission, and goals, and so forth for the outreach program. And one of the things that's driving the outreach for me is part of our most recent strategic plan, Clemson Elevate, which is to transform lives in South Carolina and beyond. So that is where I'm taking the most sort of guiding principle. And starting at the ground level. So our community outreach has to be we want it to be robust and wide ranging. And so I'm particularly pleased to take the first steps, you know, in the sort of the K-12 outreach as, you know, one of the first places that I want to go with this. Let's see, you've got me already on my next slide. The class, you know, right now, what Clemson does is the pretty traditional with outreach and instruction. We have obviously in instruction, we have classroom visits. I provide tutorials actually that I used for the undergraduate courses, but I have adapted them. And in fact, if anybody's interested, let me know. I have a tutorial on what is a primary source and how to analyze it that I created for the basically from the 6th to 12th grade level. And it is, we use the SpringShare product. It's on the LibWizard, and it has a public access. So I have actually already done a couple things where I provided that to local teachers and teachers from across the state. You know, other things that we do on a regular basis in terms of outreach is how to create a personal archive. And then, of course, community groups, giving them tours, lectures, workshops. But we also have been working on historical camps and oral history opportunities for the communities. And then, of course, now I also work as one of my service projects is as the regional coordinator for the National History Day. So those are all some of the things that you know, we do now. But when I go ahead and get me the next slide. Oops, wait, there we go. But the things that I have gotten the most experience with and found the most useful and giving me ideas for where our program will go next in terms of K-12 outreach, as I mentioned, the National History Day, but also the hidden history camps that we have conducted now the last 2 years. We're doing that in collaboration with the Historic Properties Department here on campus. And then the work that I've been trying to do with the Girl Scouts in the upstate by creating online modules that can be done synchronously online and that I can also provide asynchronously if it's through, say, one of the learning management systems. That cover the or help the students or Girl Scouts, pardon me, I'm getting myself completely mixed up. The Girl Scouts earn democracy badges, the civics badges, basically. So you know, some of the ideas for that have come from, next slide, please, from the work being done at the Robert J. Dole Archives Outreach. The outreach person there has created some really great pieces that allow Girl Scouts to work through these badges on their own, using materials from, in their case, the Robert J. Dole archives. In our case, things that I've obviously created are populated with materials from our archives. So it's those I have a lot of hope for. Sadly, the upstate sees a lot of turnover in the Girl Scout administration, and I have yet been able to pin anyone down for the last year or two, who stays there long enough. So I'm hoping that I can start more from the grassroots, really working with individual troops, then hopefully working on some locally here in the upstate, and then spreading the word from there. But the materials are easy to make. How to write a letter to your congressman. Go visit on a scavenger hunt, if you will, to the city, your local city hall, and this kind of thing, so that students are exposed to some of the institutions of civic life in a fun and interactive way, and who can learn a little bit about citizenship at an earlier age. So those can go from as early as the Brownies to the Junior Girl Scouts and beyond. In my work as regional coordinator for National History Day, I was invited to work with teachers at a teacher institute, which was grant funded by the NEH, where I shared some of my materials that I've created with teachers who wanted to prepare for and learn more about having the National History Day competition in their own classrooms, at their own schools, and then of course in the region and state. I have, on board a couple of different digital learning objects, such as the tutorial, that I am happy to have given access to as many teachers as want them. It's the biggest failing here has been much like with the Girl Scouts, but in a different way. Just getting increased communication with the local school districts in the upstate. And one of the problems there for a bit, even for a place like Clemson, is that of course teachers are overworked, and often if they don't get some kind of professional development credit for doing History Day, they won't do it. And I completely understand that. Fortunately, very recently, in just the last couple of years, the National History Day folks were able to get approval for teachers to get that kind of professional development. So I'm hoping that we can move on and expand National History Day participation in the upstate. The hidden history camps are a lot of fun. We had done the middle school 6th to 8th grade last year in June, as well as this year. An interesting age, very engaged, and we had them going to a bunch of sites of memory and lots of activities all around Clemson and Clemson's historic properties, including the cemetery, of course, the football stadium, and so forth. But that we jumped on board 2 years ago to have the students in the archive and teach them about what an archive is. They did various activities. The middle school started with a transcription exercise that was followed by, depending on which group did the best, they got to choose a set of artifacts and documents. We had 5 of those from Clemson history, the band, the football team, academics, and what's the other one? Military history. And right now the 5th one has left my mind, but they each group got to have the set of artifacts, which they then used to fill out worksheets for understanding and analyzing historical documents and artifacts. They then also got a worksheet that would allow them to set up a museum exhibit, a small one for one shelf using those artifacts. They had to decide what kind of story they were going to tell and how they would put each of the items on that shelf and what kind of information they thought they needed to have for their exhibition. We followed that up with an interview to the podcast that I run for the archive, Tigers in the Archive. And I interviewed each group, talked about their artifacts, the stories that they could tell from those artifacts, and so forth. And then that podcast episode, both last year and this year, is published to the Tigers in the Archive podcast for families, and alumni, Clemson community writ large would be able to hear the students using our materials and learning historical thinking and critical thinking and so forth. And if their parents and family wanted, the families wanted to come in, friends and family wanted to come in to our building, they would then get to see their little exhibition on display. So we did that for both of the middle school groups last year and this year, and then the 3rd to 5th grade was our first year doing it, and we had a blast. But it was crazy, needless to say. We had a lot of help and reflection from some of the folks from the College of Education that we partnered with. I don't think any of us were quite ready for what we did have, but we made it much more age appropriate. They got to have a scavenger hunt instead of analyzing primary sources. They just answered, brief questions about content and so forth. We didn't do the transcription because that's hard for almost everybody and so forth, but we did end up having them on the podcast. And I hope you guys listen to it, because it's a hoot. It doesn't make a great deal of sense because it was 30 of them, being very 3rd to 5th grade in their energy levels, but we had a blast. So we intend to keep doing that. And those are the kinds of things. Yes, postcards, absolutely, Alex. I would love to do postcards. We have a lot of them. Some of them are a little scary. Some of the ones that used to come out of the South over the decades. But in the next steps, I'm hoping to do a little bit more with the expansion of the National History Day, get somebody on board with the Girl Scouts, continue with the camps, but also I want to develop LibGuides for AP United States history and so forth. So we want to become sort of a one-stop shop in sense of keeping, keeping the special and special collections, digitizing items for student use, creating modules for online use, like developing teaching boxes. I noticed that was a topic on the listserv in the last few days, which I think is fabulous, so that we can either loan them out or do in-person class visits in local schools. So those are the kinds of things that we're doing right now. Yes, it's a little crazy. I am the only one doing it. So we're scaling back in some senses, at least on the undergraduate instruction, so we can then put our resources more evenly to some of the outreach as well as the instruction.
Wow.
I brainstorm with all of you guys, by the way. Jennifer Ottinger just said, yeah, believe me, I am the biggest fan. Part of the reason why I did this panel is because I'm like, give me a email, let's brainstorm. I'm really good at that because I've often had to do that kind of thing, be on my own doing stuff, and I don't do it by myself. Not really.
Wow.
So sorry, took longer.
No, that's great, Tara. And actually, you could invite my other panelists, Jackie and Sarah, to come back on camera and I'll just say thank you so much for attending. This session discussed how to emphasize the specialness of working with primary sources when designing resources or programs for students of all ages. It shared how collaboration and partnerships are key to making primary source literacy accessible to students in grade school, middle school, and high school, and undergraduates. And we shared more models and examples of successful work than I could possibly have kept count of. So thank you all for coming. I'm going to stop the recording, and then y'all can hang out in this room. I think we have the room until like 4:15. We can hang out and chat and ask everyone questions, since I know that was a ton of information. So again, let me stop the recording. Stop recording.